Speaker.
Erev Tov, everyone. This Shabbat is Parshat Zachor, Shabbat Zachor, and there are two mitzvot that are associated with Zachor. The positive mitzvah of Zachor is Asher Asolacha Amalek Baderech, to remember what Amalek did when the Jewish people left Egypt, that they made war unprovoked against us. And then the Torah concludes, Lo Sishkoch. The second mitzvah is Alav, not to forget. So what's the difference between the first one and the second one? If the Torah already said remember, so then we remember. There are, we say at the end of davening, there are sheshes, zechirot, 6 times in the Torah when we're told to remember. So we remember Miriam, we remember the Mon, remember Yitzias Mitzrayim, remember Amalek. But by the other ones, it doesn't say Lo Sishka. Don't say the negative part. Don't forget. Why by Amalek do we have this double commandment, so to speak, of not only remembering, but of not forgetting as well? So what's the difference between the Zachor and Lo Sishkoch? Zachor, memory, we all know is a strange thing. Our brain is, I don't want to denigrate it, but it's the most advanced computer ever imagined. In our brain, we remember everything. Everything that ever occurred to us is here somewhere. The only thing is, we have the power to sublimate things, to not remember what we don't want to remember, to take from the conscious and place it into the subconscious. And there's a whole field in psychology and in therapy, all sorts of ideas regarding this ability of human beings to remember, and at the same time to have the capacity to place things in such a position that they do not remember or they don't want to remember. So when the Torah tells us Zachor, the Torah tells us remember. But memory fades. We don't quite remember things as we once remembered them. And not only that, our opinions change as well. We may remember something that happened to us, and we thought that it was a bad experience. And in retrospect, when we remember it and we look back decades later, it was not such a bad experience. In fact, it may have even been a good experience. There are many things that happen in life that we regret, and then all of a sudden it turned out to be a wonderful thing that happened. And then there are hundreds of such examples that every human being has. Things that we originally thought were really harmful and they turned out to be beneficial to us. turned out to be a very good thing. I always mentioned here many times the story with Rav Kook, that when he was a Rav in Boysk, so one of the teenagers in the congregation, there was a great Rav that came to visit. I think it was Rabbi Zalman Meltzer came to visit, and they were waiting for Shemona Esrei for Rabbi Zalman to finish, and he davened what appeared to be a lengthy Shemona Esrei. So this young man, he was 17, 18, whatever it was, he says, what are we waiting for the old man? Come, we got to go. And Rav Kook went over and slapped him. Now, in Litta, the custom was understood that the Rav had a right to slap the Balabat. Custom which I'm trying to reintroduce without success. He slapped him. Chotzev. And the young man was so shamed that he left town and he immigrated to America. Rav Kook came to America in 1923 on a delegation. The governor Rav Duber Kahana Shapiro and the Rosh Yeshiva Slobodka, Mincha Mordechai Epstein, and Rav Kook together, the three Rabbonim, came to America after the First World War to raise funds to try and rebuild what had been destroyed in the First World War. And Harry Fischel was one of the leading Orthodox Balabatim at the time, made a reception for them in the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and people came and gave large amounts of money, and they lined up to shake hands with the great Rabbonim. And a man came up to Rav Kook and he shook his hand, and he said, "Rebbe, do you remember me?" And Rav Kook looked at him and he said, "I have to tell you the truth, I don't remember you." It's 30 years later. So he said, "You once slapped me." And so Rav Kook remembered the incident and he turned white. The man said, "Rav Kook, I want you to know, he slapped me. I had to leave Lita. I came to America. I became a multimillionaire. Here's the other cheek, slapped me again." So in perspective, how we remember things changes, if we remember it at all. So you see that Rav Kook didn't remember the incident, but the other man did remember the incident. So memory is strange. Because of the ability of memory to sublimate the things that happened to us and to reinterpret what happened to us. So the Torah said, when it comes to Amalek, Lo tishkoch, don't forget. First of all, don't forget that it happened. Don't say bygones will be bygones, all right? It didn't happen, or it's not my generation. Don't forget. And the second thing is, Lo tishkoch, don't forget by reinterpreting past events. In the reinterpretation often of past events, the victim becomes the perpetrator. It was our fault. What did we do wrong? What do you mean Amalek came? Amalek out of thin air? It must have been, the Jews started up with them. There were too many Jewish doctors. So the Torah tells us, Lo tishkoch, don't forget the true circumstances. Because if you forget the true circumstances, what happened, so then you may, over time, have a distorted view, even of the Zachor, to remember. We ourselves are witness to that over the events of the last century. Denials, explanations, all sorts of things. We find the same thing in the Torah in another case, by the Sar HaMashkim, with Yosef. V'lo zochar Sar HaMashkim es Yosef. He got out of jail. He was restored to his position. Yosef had asked him, please don't forget me. He sublimated that whole story because he didn't want to remember his own shame. He didn't want to remember that he was in jail. And then it says, Vayishkacheyu. He put it into the bank that he wouldn't remember it. He did everything possible to forget him until his story with the dream of the Pharaoh, when he is forced to remember, his memory is jogged all of a sudden. So the Torah wanted us to understand that Amalek and Haman, all of these things are real. As we see, they are real. So even though, as the Rambam points out, we cannot identify Amalek anymore. So there really is no possibility of Mechias Amalek in a physical sense, destroying Amalek. We don't know who Amalek is. But we do know who Amalek is in a moral sense. We see it in the world over and over again. That Vayovo Amalek comes, and Amalek has no moral conscience, and Amalek is capable of unprovoked aggression. Doesn't make any difference to him. So we should not lull ourselves into the belief that somehow these are all past stories. That these are things that never happen anymore. That it couldn't be. This whole current war is an example. You know, how could it be after 75 years and everybody else? We're all getting along, right? Europe is quiet. So there are reminders along the way. And therefore, we are bidden to remember. And more importantly, we're bidden not to forget, not to sublimate things, not to reinterpret, but to remember clearly, because that becomes a defense mechanism that's necessary for survival. A defense mechanism that allows us to live in a very hostile and dangerous world. So this Shabbos, we have the opportunity to be Mekayim these two mitzvot of remembering Amalek and not forgetting Amalek. But those are things that we should remember every day of the year and every day of our lives, because that's a true description of the status of humanity and of our place in it. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Rotzah Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakas Yisrael V'Chochim Lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenemar Adonai Chafetz Mantzit Kol Yagil
Skadad Shmei Chabam Yamad Diva Pirsei Yamlir Mavusei